Hi guys, thanks for tuning in again. I really miss seeing you guys on Wednesday nights and being able to hang out. I would actually say Wednesday night is one of my favorite nights of the week, and I love going to youth group. It's so much fun. I get really excited for the games. I get excited for the funny things that might happen, and I really miss that. So it'll be cool to go back to a time where we are all meeting together again. And it's pretty bizarre that Easter's coming up. It'll be interesting to see what Easter will be like if we're still kind of in lockdown with the coronavirus. Easter's only a couple weeks away. Maybe for Easter, when you were a kid, you would do an Easter egg hunt going around your house. And I remember loving to do that when I was a kid. I would run faster than everyone else. My sister isn't very athletic, so I'd beat her to all the eggs. And I'd try to get as much candy and stuff that I could. And so Easter kind of brings up lots of fond memories. Perhaps you know those little yellow peeps, the little like bird thing that's like a marshmallow, and putting those in the microwave until they explode and doing stuff like that. So I really like Easter. Has a special spot in my heart. You know, the story behind Easter is kind of interesting. It's about Jesus and his resurrection from the grave. And we also have Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday, not to be confused with Black Friday, like I do all the time. We have like these other holidays, and sometimes it's hard to remember what these things represent or what do they mean. And so remembering that Easter is a significant holiday because it's talking about Jesus' resurrection. Jesus went through something really hard, which was death, and he came out on the other side. So to parallel that, we're gonna have Elaine share a story about the time that she went through something kind of difficult. But first, I find it easier to go through something difficult when there's someone who's also been through something similar with me. An example about this that's not super deep, and I try not to talk about rock climbing too much because it is my favorite hobby. But sometimes while I'm climbing, I'll look down and I'll see my belayer. And my belayer is the person who's holding the rope, and they're there to catch me if I fall. But my belayer will be talking and joking around with other people that are down on the ground. And that makes me kind of upset because I'm up here risking my life, climbing, and I'm probably not really risking my life, but I'm up there climbing, I'm kind of scared and a little bit nervous, and they don't even understand. They're down there chatting with someone, not paying full attention to me, and it makes me uncomfortable, it makes me nervous, it makes me scared. I want someone who understands. I want a belayer who's down there looking up and they know this is kind of scary. And a lot of times what's kind of fun is if you're the first person to climb the route, when you switch and the other person does it, they'll apologize. They're like, man, I'm really sorry that I wasn't paying more attention. I'm sorry I wasn't focused on you because now I realize how scary that was. So it's really nice to go through something with someone who understands, someone who's been through something before as well. So we're gonna have Elaine come out and share a time that she went through something difficult and how it's good to have people that understood her.
So maybe you guys have heard me reference this guy before or heard me tell this story before, but I went through a really bad breakup before I met Lucas, and I thought I was gonna marry this guy, but I was feeling pretty sure of it.
This guy was no good at all, bad person. Should not have dated him. In retrospect.
Yeah.
2020 hindsight is.
Do you really want that in this video? So anyways, I didn't end up with him, and it broke my heart, and I was super, super sad, and I remember crying on the phone with my mom and my sister, and they then booked a hotel in the town of my university to come visit me, which was super helpful. And they came, and nothing really needed to be said. I don't remember any major conversations about it. They were just there for me. They were just with me through that hard time. And now it's not. It's I tell that story only to give an example that, life really, really moves on, and moves on for so much the better. So I'm really thankful that they were there for me, though, during that time.
Thank you for sharing that, Elaine. I'm really glad that eventually you ended up marrying me and all of your problems were solved. When we're experiencing something difficult, sometimes the thing that we need the very most is someone who understands, someone who's been through that difficult time themselves. When life gets tough, it's really easy to think we're the only one who's gone through this thing that we're going through. Or we might feel like no one else could understand what I'm going through. And it's important then to have people in your life that do care and that do love you. But it's easy also for this time to happen along with when you fail a test, when you don't make the team, or when you try out for something, for show choir, for first chair, and you don't get there, or even your family is struggling, or right when someone at school says something really hurtful to you and you feel like you are completely alone. And sometimes you might even think, maybe I should just give up. It's not even worth trying anymore. But sometimes it's hard to know this, but Jesus is someone who's gone through similar experiences to you, and he has a story that is similar in a lot of ways with your story. When life gets difficult, we might wonder, why is God letting this happen to me? Does God even care? And believe it or not, Jesus understands what it's like to ask questions, and he's asked those same questions as well. If you've been going to church for any amount of time, you've probably heard a lot of people talk about Jesus' death and resurrection. And there's a lot of good things to be learned about Jesus' death and resurrection, but we want to talk a little bit more about what happened before he died and how he handled the suffering that he went through. In Matthew 26, it talks a lot about Jesus' friendships with his disciples and how those kind of begin to get strained as he gets closer to death. And eventually, one of them is the one who turns him into the authorities. And there's a couple verses I want to highlight first for us, and that is Matthew 26, 36 through 39. And I'm going to read from the Message here. It says, "Then Jesus went with them to a garden called Gethsemane and told his disciples, 'Stay here while I go over there and pray.' Taking along Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he plunged into an agonizing sorrow. Then he said, 'This sorrow is crushing my life out. Stay here and keep vigil with me.' Going a little ahead, he fell on his face, praying, 'My Father, if there is any way, get me out of this. But please, not what I want. What do you want?'" It's interesting in this one chapter, Matthew 26, we see Jesus get betrayed by his friends, given up on by the people that love him. He gets accused, convicted to be killed. He gets spit on and tortured and beat. And you just feel really bad for this person. He's experienced more suffering than any of us probably have in our entire lives. And you'd expect the Son of God might just like walk through all this suffering completely unfazed and with absolute peace. But when we look at the verse 36 through 39, we see that Jesus is really experiencing some difficult times, and he doesn't like what he's going through. The biblical accounts of what Jesus was going through use words like anguished, overwhelmed. He was going through a tremendous amount of pain and suffering at this time. And even when he talks to his Father, he's like to God in heaven, he's always saying, is there another way that I can get out of this? If I were Jesus, I'd be asking God another question. I'd be saying, God, is it worth it? Are these the people you want me to die for? These people have forgotten about me, have humiliated me, want to kill me? Are these the people that I'm supposed to die for and to save? Not only did Jesus suffer, but so did the first century Christians that followed Jesus. You see, the Roman government was threatened by Jesus' teachings and the message of Jesus. And because of this, the followers were also suffering under Roman rule as well. Naturally, this made followers of Jesus also wonder, is this worth it? Is this how I should be trying to live my life? Is this what I should be pursuing? And we saw a lot of Jewish people start to follow Jesus. A lot of them at this time were wondering, should I go back to what I used to do? And that's where the book of Hebrews comes in, because the book of Hebrews was written to followers of Jesus who were starting to wonder, is all this suffering and pain worth it? The author of Hebrews tells the followers of Jesus to stay with it and to keep going because it is worth it. And we're going to take a look in Hebrews. We're going to read Hebrews 2:9 and then also 17 through 18 and 14 through 16. So let me go ahead and pull those ones up. Hebrews 2:9 says, "But we do see Jesus, who was made lower than the angels for a little while, now crowned with glory and honor because he suffered death, so that by grace of God he might taste death for everyone." We're going to scroll down to 2:17 through 18. That says, "For this reason he had to be made like them, fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of the people, because he himself suffered when he was tempted. He is able to help those who are being tempted." That's really cool to hear. God went through it too. God knew he had to come here as a person, as a human being, which was Jesus, to go through what we go through. Now we're going to skip down to Hebrews 4:14 through 16. "Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne to grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. The writer of Hebrews refers to Jesus as our high priest, which would be very well known to the Jewish culture of people who are reading this. A high priest is someone who makes sacrifices to God when people messed up. A high priest also helps people connect with God, and a high priest prays to God on people's behalf. But the writer of Hebrews refers to Jesus as our new high priest, because Jesus didn't come to make a sacrifice, he was the sacrifice. Said Jesus came and gave his life so that we could always and forever be connected with God. Jesus represents humanity to God for us. To these Jesus Jewish followers, they understood the importance of having a high priest. This was a very convincing argument for them. But their problem wasn't knowing who Jesus was, it was that life was hard for them. They didn't just need a convincing argument. They needed to understand that someone was with them through the suffering. And that's why the writer of Hebrews is pointing them to Jesus' suffering. Because Jesus knows what it's like to have a friend betray you. Jesus knows what it's like to not have anyone love you. Jesus knows what it's like to go through pain. Jesus knows what it's like to go through a loss of a friend. Jesus knows what it's like to be tempted to do something you know is wrong. Jesus has been rejected. And Jesus knows what it's like to hurt so much that you even question God. The writer of Hebrews was writing to all Jesus followers and to us too, that we should hold on and know that it's still worth it, that Jesus knows what it's like to suffer and he's walking with us through our own suffering. We already said that comfort comes best from someone who understands what we're going through. If that's true, then we know that Jesus is probably the best person for us to go to for comfort because he understands everything that we could go through. So is it worth it? When Jesus was staring death, humiliation, and torture in the face, he saw us and he said, yes, it was worth it. And then for us, when we go through difficulties and problems through following Christ, is it still worth it for us? And Hebrews would say, yes, it is still worth it for us to follow Jesus. Life isn't easy, and following Jesus isn't always easy either. But I hope that you remember that as you're going through suffering, that the creator of the world suffers with you, and he loves you during that time. Good Friday is a day that we remember the suffering and grief that Jesus went through. But it can also be kind of a special day because it helps us remember that we have a God that suffers with us, and he understands what we're going through, not just in theory, but in practice as well. It doesn't matter how great your suffering is, Jesus understands. It could be a failed class, a bad relationship with someone, or it could be something so much worse than that, but Jesus still understands and he is still with you. When life gets hard, there are 3 reasons Good Friday reminds me that God understands me. First, Good Friday reminds us that we are not alone, that we are walking through suffering with someone else. Second, Good Friday reminds us that we can go to God with our suffering. We can go to him with our questions, tell him what happened and all that, and he'll understand and listen. Third, Good Friday helps us to remember to comfort others. When we see all the suffering that Jesus went through, it should help us be more compassionate towards other people. Good Friday is a great example for us to look and ask God to show us who we can be a comfort to and who we can help out as well. Sometimes experiencing painful and difficult things makes us feel like we are far away from God. But what if we flip that around and we see our pain and stressful situations that we go through as a way for us to get to know God more and to lean into him more? Are you disappointed, stressed out, lonely, or afraid? Jesus knows what it's like to be in every single one of those situations. What if instead of asking God, why did you let this happen to me, you ask God, when did you feel this way as well? As we close, I hope that you'll find some time throughout this week and during the whole coronavirus where you have extra time at home to yourself to really spend time talking with God. Maybe spend some time thanking him that he saw you worth it when he was going through suffering and pain. Also, look to God and say, help me to find someone else that I can be compassionate to. Who is someone that I should care for and love during this time? And this is a good time to tell God the suffering that you're going through and ask to get closer to him through this time. So thank you for tuning in again this Wednesday night. I hope that this was beneficial for you, and we'll look forward to hanging out with you guys in Google Hangouts. See you next week.